받아들이는 것은 다르기 때문에 번역가들이 그런 차이점을 모르면 번역할 때는 어렵고 오해할 수도 있거든요. 오해할 수도 있어서 그런 부분이 좀 신경 써야 하지 않은가. 그리고 한국어와 베트남어의 문법상으로 봤을 때 거꾸로 되어 있습니다. 그래서 그런 부분도 신경 써야 하고, 그리고 한국어의 특징은 수식 부분이 있는데 그 수식 부분을 주어의 수식 부분인지 또는 목적어의 수식 부분인지를 잘 구별해서 해야 하는 것 같습니다. 네, 작품에서 인간이 겪는 그런 일들을 다루거나 혹은 사람이 아름답게 살아가는 권장들을 하는 작품들인 것 같습니다. 제가 여태까지 한국 문학을 많이 번역했는데요. 제 전공은 아까 말씀드렸지만은 고전 문학이다 보니까 공부하고 이제 하다 보면은 이제 역사랑 관련성이 있어가지고 많이 읽게 되고요. 그래서 문학을 하면서 역사도 보니까 너무 재미있는 거예요. 그래서 이제 하나의 꿈이 뭐가 있냐면은 기회가 되면 한국 역사 자료들을 각 시기별로 한국 고대사부터 현대사까지 번역하고 싶습니다. 네.
President Lee Jae-myung and Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi agreed to upgrade Seoul-Tokyo cooperation on supply chains amid the ongoing Middle East conflict, as well as in securing crude oil and LNG supplies. Samsung Electronics and its union are struggling to narrow their differences over performance-based bonuses on Tuesday, the last day of the second government-led negotiations. U.S. President Donald Trump said he's delaying a military strike on Iran that had been planned for Tuesday, citing what he called serious negotiations aimed at ending the war. As Washington also moved to once again permit purchases of Russian oil to support countries vulnerable to the global energy crisis. We begin in Andong City tonight, where President Lee Jae-myung is hosting Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi. The summit wrapped up earlier today with a pledge to tighten Seoul-Tokyo cooperation on supply chains and procurement of crude oil and LNG. For more, we go live to Andong with our Moon Hae-ryun standing by. Hae-ryun, walk us through the summit's key outcomes first, please.
Good evening, Tammy. So I'm standing close to the summit venue where talks between President Lee and Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi wrapped up this afternoon after covering a wide range of issues. And during the press conference, the joint press conference, immediately following the talks, both leaders emerged with a very clear message that South Korea-Japan cooperation on, energy and supply chains has never been more urgent, especially with the situation in the Middle East that's been cited as a key driver.
지난 3월 체결된 LNG 수급 협력 협약서를 바탕으로 양국 간 LNG 협력을 확대하는 한편 원유 수급 및 비축과 관련한 정보 공유와 소통 채널 또한 심화해 나가기로 하였습니다.
Prime Minister Takaichi further added that she and President Lee had agreed to launch mutual supply arrangements and swap transactions covering crude oil, petroleum products and LNG. On security, the two sides reaffirmed the importance of their trilateral cooperation with the United States, welcoming the recent elevation of bilateral security consultations to the vice ministerial level. Both leaders also highlighted the signing of a police cooperation memorandum on transnational scam crimes and agreed to continue discussions on AI and economic security. President Lee expressed hope for future-oriented cooperation as both sides mark the 60th anniversary of normalized relations this year, while Prime Minister Takaichi ended on a lighter note by inviting President Lee to Japan for the next meeting.
Now, Hae-ryun, the Japanese PM will be here in the country until tomorrow. What's on the agenda for Takaichi during the rest of her stay here in South Korea?
So the dinner banquet immediately following the talks, featuring a wide range of dishes and drinks that's local to the city of Andong, is still underway, but the two leaders are set to enjoy a traditional performance of pansori, which is a Korean narrative opera at the local heritage UNESCO site of Hae Folk Village. Now, this is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, as I mentioned earlier, and this is also a popular tourist site. Now, as I continue, this is also President Lee has also prepared a set of gifts for Prime Minister Takaichi that is rooted in Andong's cultural heritage, and is each chosen to symbolize the history and friendship between the two countries. The reason why there is so much focus being placed on the culture and cuisine of the city is because this is President Lee's hometown, and this visit from Prime Minister Takaichi is a direct reciprocation of his trip to her home prefecture of Nara earlier this year, making it the first time the two countries' leaders have exchanged hometown visits.
I'm very pleased to meet with President Lee again here in Andong, his hometown. By continuing shuttle diplomacy without delay, first in Nara and now here in Andong, I feel that the friendship and trust between us have grown even deeper.
So after wrapping up her trip with a night of immersion in Andong's cultural heritage, Prime Minister Takaichi will be returning to Japan tomorrow. That's all I have for tonight, so back to you, Tammy.
All right, Hae-ryun, thank you for your coverage. Now, in other news, Samsung Electronics and its labor union remain locked in last-minute talks, with no final outcome announced past the expected 7 p.m. deadline. Now, the National Labor Relations Commission said it's expected to either help the two sides reach an agreement or submit a formal mediation proposal at around 10 p.m. tonight. The two sides have been trying to hash out a deal on performance-based bonus payments before an 18-day strike scheduled to begin on Thursday. Now, the key dispute centers on how to fund and distribute performance bonuses. So the union wants a larger bonus pool based on operating profit, while management is pushing to maintain the current performance-based compensation system. The planned walkout involves nearly 48,000 unionized workers. Ahead of the final round of negotiations on Tuesday, Industry Minister Kim Jong-un stressed that the planned walkout must be prevented at all costs, noting concerns over the severe economic fallout it could trigger. U.S. President Donald Trump says he's called off a planned strike on Iran following appeals from Gulf allies, adding that serious negotiations are now underway to prevent further escalation. Cheongung-II reports.
U.S. President Donald Trump announced on Monday that he had suspended a military strike on Iran that had been scheduled for Tuesday. The decision reportedly came as serious negotiations toward a peace agreement were underway. In a post on Truth Social, Trump said he had been asked to halt the strike by leaders of Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. The U.S. president said the pause was considered very acceptable to the U.S. and countries in the Middle East, but stressed that there would be no nuclear weapons for Iran.
I've put it off for a little while, hopefully maybe forever, but possibly for a little while, because we've had very big discussions with Iran, and we'll see what they amount to. I was asked by...
Trump's remarks came as Tehran reportedly submitted a revised 14-point peace proposal through Pakistani mediators. A Pakistani source which has conveyed messages between the two sides since hosting the peace talks last month confirmed that Islamabad had delivered the latest proposal to Washington. Iranian state media earlier reported that Washington had failed to offer any concrete concessions to Tehran.
Therefore, from the very day after we sent our points to the American side via Pakistan, we were faced with a series of proposals from the other side which have been reviewed over the past few days. As was announced yesterday, our own views have in turn been conveyed to the American side.
The latest response came after Trump warned Sunday that the clock is ticking for Iran to accept a peace agreement, saying that there won't be anything left of them if Iranian leaders did not get moving fast. Tehran, meanwhile, says its current focus is entirely on reaching an agreement to end the war, adding that detailed discussions on nuclear issues have not yet taken place, leaving it as one of the key sticking points in the negotiations. Cheongung-II, Arirang News.
Iran has launched a Bitcoin-backed insurance service for Iranian shipping companies operating through the Strait of Hormuz. According to a report by Iran's Fars news agency citing documents from the country's Ministry of Economy and Financial Affairs, the insurance platform called Hormuz Safe offers Iranian shipping firms and cargo owners fast, verifiable digital insurance. Now, Iran has also launched the Persian Gulf Strait Authority, which is a formal body to manage the Strait of Hormuz, collect transit fees, and designate approved shipping routes. The Iranian government aims to generate more than $10 billion in revenue through the insurance service. In the meantime, the Trump administration is granting another 30-day extension to a sanctions waiver, allowing purchases of Russian seaborne oil to support energy-vulnerable nations affected by the Iran conflict. Our Kim Jun-hong has more.
The U.S. has extended for another 30 days a sanction waiver allowing purchases of Russian seaborne oil for what it called energy-vulnerable countries amid growing uncertainty surrounding the Iran war. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said in a post on X Monday that Washington is issuing a new 30-day general license. This will allow any country to purchase Russian oil and petroleum products stranded on tankers after the previous waiver expired on Saturday without violating U.S. sanctions on major Russian energy firms. The waiver is the second 30-day extension since the measure was first introduced in March. It also reverses earlier plans by the Treasury chief not to grant another extension after he said last month that no further renewal was under consideration. According to Reuters, the latest waiver came at the request of vulnerable countries unable to secure Gulf oil shipments due to the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. Bessent added that the measure would reroute existing oil supplies toward nations most in need and enable countries to compete with China for the previously sanctioned oil. Meanwhile, international oil prices swung sharply the same day Washington announced its latest sanctions relief measure as markets reacted to rapidly evolving developments surrounding the Iran war. The global benchmark Brent crude briefly climbed above $112 a barrel, up 2.6% from the previous session and marking its highest level in about 2 weeks. Prices later pulled back below $109 after U.S. President Donald Trump said he would hold off on a planned military strike against Iran at the request of regional allies. Kim Jun-hong, Arirang News.
Russian President Vladimir Putin is paying a two-day state visit to China starting today. His summit meeting with his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping will take place tomorrow on Wednesday. And on their agenda is economic and energy cooperation, as well as the war in Ukraine. In a video address ahead of his departure, Putin claimed the two countries will support each other on issues of sovereignty and national unity, hinting at strategic partnership with regard to issues surrounding Ukraine and Taiwan. Meanwhile, Russia's presidential aide Yuri Yushakov has rejected all talks of relevance between Putin's visit to Beijing this week and Donald Trump's visit to Beijing last week. Local elections here in South Korea are entering a decisive phase with 2 days left till official campaigning begins. Now, with that, the National Election Commission has stressed strict guidelines ahead of the intense period. For details, we have our political correspondent An Sung-jin here in the studio. Welcome back, Sung-jin.
My pleasure to be here.
So, Sung-jin, I've heard you prepared 3 different keywords to go over the latest details. I heard the first one is the end of candidate registration. Let's start with that.
Right, so let's start with that. Just as you mentioned, as official candidate registration closed last week, nearly 8,000 candidates registered for this local election and parliamentary by-election. And among them, more than 500 are expected to secure victory uncontested. Now, according to the National Election Commission, roughly 13% of the electoral districts had only a single registered candidate. This includes 3 heads of local governments and around 100 constituency-based Metropolitan Council members. This figure marks the second highest number of uncontested victories since local elections were introduced, the highest number of uncontested winners being the second local elections when 738 candidates were elected unopposed. However, the final figure could still shift if candidates withdraw before Election Day, but the unusually high number of automatic wins has already hinted at political competition and regional party dominance ahead of the June 3rd vote. Now, at the same time, the average candidate-to-seat ratio stood at 1.841 to 1, the lowest on record, slightly lower than the 2022 local elections when it marked 1.843 to 1.
So now that the official candidate registration has ended, that will lead to ballot printing, which is the second keyword. What is that about?
Right, so the second keyword is ballot printing, just as you mentioned, and as official registration is finished, now we are moving to ballot printing for the local and parliamentary by-elections, officially beginning on May 18th. Now, this means that candidate names will be effectively on voting papers. This entails that the first deadline has passed for rival camps to unify contenders in a closely fought districts, since names are already on ballots, pressuring split votes. For several competition regions, including the parliamentary by-elections for Busan Bukap District and Pyeongtaek-ul, this may signal that they will not be forthcoming with a unified candidates. Now, as the ballot printing process begins, voters arriving at polling stations will receive up to 8 separate ballots for mayors and provincial governors, education superintendents, heads of local governments such as district chiefs and county governors. And in districts holding parliamentary by-elections, voters will receive 1 additional ballot for a total of up to 8 ballots. And now, to help avoid confusion, each ballot will be printed in a different color.
I see. Then now that will lead to official campaigning. I mentioned we are left now with only 2 days till official campaigning kicks off. How is the process looking to unfold this time?
Right, so political parties really are racing as time really kicks in for the official campaigning on May 21st. This means that election campaigning will continue up until June 2nd, 1 day before Election Day. Now, during this 13-day campaign period, candidates may deliver public speeches and hold debates between 7 a.m. and 11 p.m., though loudspeakers and recording equipment will only be permitted until 9 p.m. Election authorities also reiterated strict regulations against election misinformation, especially the creation or distribution of deepfake campaign materials, which have been banned for 90 days before the vote. Spreading false information or defamatory posts about candidates on social media could also result in legal penalties. With the local elections around 2 weeks away, we will continue to see political parties racing against time once the official campaign kicks off.
The next 2 weeks still look busy at the National Assembly and loud on the streets. Sung-jin, thank you for the coverage tonight.
Thanks for having me, Dami.
The conflict in the Middle East has a renewed global interest in South Korea's air defense capabilities, prompting the Air Force to give reporters a rare access to a live demonstration of its missile defense system. Our defense correspondent Kim Bo-kyung files this report.
With loud sirens signaling the detection of an enemy ballistic missile launch, personnel from the Missile Defense Command sprint to the Cheongung-II launcher. Through swift procedures, the system is brought to full launch readiness within just 10 minutes. This is the Cheongung-II system that responded to Iran's large-scale combined ballistic missile attacks during the Iran war earlier this year. As you can see, each vertical launcher has 8 interceptor missiles. With the control center pressing the simulated launch button, the virtual ballistic missile on the radar disappears instantly, marking the end of the successful drill. The Cheongung-II system is one of the key components of South Korea's multi-layered missile defense network. After recording 29 successful interceptions out of 30 launches during the U.S.-Iran war, the system has attracted attention from many countries in the Middle East, Southeast Asia, and South America. Cheongung-II is emerging as a viable alternative to the Patriot system, thanks to its lower missile cost, significantly shorter delivery timelines, and flexible engagement capability. It uses cold launch technology, in which the missile is first ejected more than 10 meters into the air before the rocket ignites, and then turns toward its target in flight. This enables the launcher to engage targets without rotating, while minimizing the flame and blast effects on the ground and nearby equipment.
Our Cheongung-II demonstrates outstanding performance and is drawing strong international interest in exports. We conduct realistic daily training to defend South Korea against North Korea's increasingly advanced nuclear and missile threats.
Already serving as the core asset of South Korea's air and missile defense network, the system is now gaining momentum in the global defense market. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News, Sacheon.
The Ministry of Unification clarified on Tuesday that the phrase peaceful two states from this year's unification white paper is not the government's official position. A ministry official told reporters at the government complex, however, that the expression of a peaceful two states is one of the concepts the Unification Ministry has introduced to support peaceful coexistence between the two Koreas. The official reiterated that this does not mean acknowledging North Korea as a legal state. Rather, the idea is to recognize North Korea as a political entity and pursue policy on that foundation. A press conference was held earlier today at the Suwon Sports Complex ahead of the AFC Women's Champions League semifinal between Suwon FC women of South Korea and Naegohyang FC from North Korea. Head coach Lee Yoo-il of the North Korean team said his players are ready to perform their best. And forward and Naegohyang captain Kim Kyung-young added that the team atmosphere remained positive and that her teammates will give their all in light of the expectations of their people. Now, the semifinal match between clubs of the two Koreas kicks off at 7 p.m. on Wednesday in Suwon City. The 2026 Overseas Korean Adoptees Gathering kicked off here in Seoul this week, bringing together nearly 100 participants. Now, the 5-day event aims to reconnect adoptees with their mother country and foster cultural identity. Our Jung Hae-rim was there.
95 different stories from 14 different countries gathered in Seoul on Monday, the opening ceremony of the Overseas Korean Adoptees Gathering hosted by OKAG marked the beginning of a powerful collective homecoming.
I do not speak Korean. I do not understand all the rules and customs of the culture, but I do eat bibimbap every chance I get. Only later did I circle back to questions of identity and origin. What I can tell you from my own experience is this: my Korean story has just begun.
For organization leaders who have dedicated their lives to supporting this community, this return represents a monumental chapter.
You will still have a need to find something that is beyond what your adoptee family can give you, because normally you will not look the same. You will find it very common to have the same kind of questions and have the same kind of doubts. So I think going back for us is a way to deal with that, and we support each other while we are here.
That ongoing journey moves straight into the heart of traditional Korean culture today. Participants gathered at Namsangol Hanok village to experience a tea ceremony and an etiquette classroom, taking their first steps towards practicing customs they had never known before. For participants like Matthias from Sweden, it's also an exploration of a modern, fast-paced city.
So I've just been walking around, feeling the vibe of the city and just enjoying my time here, really. There's not really much to do back home if you're trying to go out at 11, 12 p.m., which is completely different from Seoul. So it's been really fun, and yeah, it's very different. It's still just a good chance for me to explore more and learn more about where I'm from.
Another way participants connect with their roots is through food. Separated from their birth countries from a very young age, some are even trying traditional 시장 food, such as 빈대떡, for the first time.
Whether they're searching for profound, lifelong answers to their past or simply soaking in the energy of Seoul, this gathering proves that coming home has no single predefined tract. Through this event, adoptees embraced their own stories in different ways. 정혜림, Arirang News.
The early summer heat will ease with rain tomorrow, bringing temperatures back to seasonal levels. Tomorrow highs will be around 21 degrees Celsius in Seoul and 20 degrees in Daegu. Pretty typical for this time of year. Rain is expected nationwide early tomorrow. In terms of rainfall, the mountainous areas of Jeju Island could see up to 120 millimeters. The Jeollado and Gyeongsang-do provinces are expected to receive 10 to 60, while parts of the central regions could see as much as 80 millimeters. As for temperatures, Seoul will start the day at 19 degrees, Daejeon at 17 degrees, Busan at 18 degrees. Then by the afternoon, Seoul will get up to 21 degrees, Chuncheon at 20 degrees, Gwangju at 23 degrees. By Thursday afternoon, most of the rain will taper off and temperatures will start to rise again. Now here's a look at the weather around the world.
That is all we have for tonight. I'm Kim Dami. From all of us here at Arirang, thanks for watching and good night.
저는 이제 손글씨 쓰는 거를 되게 좋아했었는데요. 처음에는 이제 취미로 시작을 했고 이제 하다 보니까 글씨를 쓰는 행위 자체가 정서적으로 돌봄을 시켜주더라고요. 제가 많이 힘든 시기에 글씨를 쓰기 시작했었거든요. 돌이켜보면 힘든 시기를 글씨로 극복했었던 것 같아요. 이제 글이 갖는 힘이 있어요. 네, 그래서 이제 저도 글씨를 처음에 형적으로만 이렇게 표현을 하고 그림 그리듯이 썼었거든요. 근데 쓰다 보니까 점점 글을 쓰게 되더라고요. 이제 글이 글씨가 되고 글씨가 글이 되고 이 메시지적인 부분이 크다 보니까 그런 어떤 직관적인 힘을 갖고 있는 것 같아요. 이렇게 글씨를 쓰는 행위 자체가 되게 아름답다고 느꼈거든요. 그래서 이걸 쓰는 순간을 한번 예술로 만들어 보면 좋겠다 해서 제가 글씨를 원래는 이렇게 책상 위에서 썼다면 어떤 벽면에 세우듯이 마치 춤을 추듯이 그렇게 이제 글씨를 퍼포먼스 공연으로 한번 해볼까 해서 이렇게 시작하게 된 것 같아요. 외국인 분들도 이걸 뜻을 알지 못해도 되게 아름답다고 느끼시고 예쁘게 봐주시는 것 같더라고요. 여러 기억이 있지만 또 카타르에서의 경험이 되게 기억이 나요. 어떤 분이 이제 보시면서 우시더라고요. 그런 장면들이 어쩌면 저를 계속 이렇게 하게 하는 그런 원동력이 되는 것 같기도 해요. 해외 나가면 오히려 더 애국심이 생기더라고요. 그래서 세계 시장으로 나가고 싶어요. 공연이 될 수도 있고 교육이 될 수도 있을 것 같아요. 이런 한글을 쓰는 행위 자체가 지금은 사실 손글씨도 잘 안 쓰는 시대지만 오히려 이런 시대일수록 되게 더 가치 있는 일이 될 것 같다고 이제 제가 믿거든요. 그리고 제가 그런 역할을 할 수 있으면 되게 좋을 것 같아요.
held its first debate over the weekend.
The economy is expected to expand 2.5% this year.
Korea's ties with its global partners on the sidelines of the latest UN summit.
A massive drone attack on Ukraine overnight on Monday and Tuesday. Arirang. Knock knock. The magical door to the world of K-animation is swinging wide open. Meet your instant new BFF, the adorable Catch. Tina Ping will have you hooked from the very first glance. Need a hand? Our Robocar Poli Rescue team is always zooming in to save the day. How about tagging along on Pinkfong and Pal's super exciting quest to reclaim their lost magic? With the mysterious life forms Kebion by your side, you can become a Kebion master and save humanity like a total hero. Protecting children's innocence while igniting their boundless imaginations. That's the magic of Korean animation. K-animation, the ultimate bestie for kids worldwide.
Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mo-gyan. South Korean President Lee Jae-myung hosted Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi in his hometown of Andong today, as Korea and Japan sought to push ties beyond historical tensions and towards broader strategic cooperation. During their fourth face-to-face meeting, the two leaders agreed to deepen coordination on energy, supply chains, advanced technologies, and regional security, while also reaffirming closer bilateral and Korea-U.S.-Japan cooperation amid growing uncertainty surrounding North Korea and the broader Indo-Pacific. The summit also carried heavy symbolic weight, combining formal diplomacy with traditional Andong culture and ceremony. So how significant was today's meeting, and could it mark a real turning point in Korea-Japan relations? For a deeper analysis on this, we connect to Choi Hyun-jin, Professor of Political Science at Kyunghee University. A big welcome, Professor.
Good evening. Glad to be here.
And also joining us is Matthew David Jenkins, Associate Professor of Political Science at Gyeongsang National University. Good to see you, Professor.
Good evening. Thanks for having me.
So let's start a discussion with Professor Jenkins. So after we've seen the summit go on today, I wonder, how did you assess today's summit overall between the two leaders, and what stood out to you the most?
Yeah, so I mean, I would say it was very successful. It was, it's the main thing that stands out to me is the fact that it happened at all, right? That these summits are happening at all, and the deepness, right? The depth of the cultural exchange. On the one hand, it's very symbolic, right? Exchanging cultures, exchanging liquors, right? Foods, and these kinds of things. On the other hand, if you think about the context of the relationship between Korea and Japan, this doesn't happen every day, right? The last time we saw this kind of exchange, this level of exchange, was probably it's almost 30 years ago in the Kim Dae-jung administration with Prime Minister Oguchi, right? And so, and before that, Prime Minister Hosokawa came to visit Korea and apologized about, the past atrocities and things like that. And the focus wasn't really about strategic cooperation. It was just about, like, can we exist as two countries next to each other and not, like, be so angry about the past or be so angry about the political stances, right? And it's just it's pretty incredible, honestly. And not just this summit, but to see the summit last time where they're drumming in Nara, right? That was pretty amazing. And I think just the fact that they have kept it going is amazing, and really interesting to see if they continue to keep it going.
Right. Like you said, the fact that it happened in just a couple months since their last encounter is in fact a very big development. And also, one of the most striking aspects of today's summit was also the setting itself, with the meeting taking place in Andong, President Lee's hometown, and a symbolic center of Korea's traditional culture. Professor Che, how meaningful was the choice of this venue?
Yeah, I think the choice of Andong as a venue was very symbolic and important. As you just mentioned, Andong is known as one of the cultural and the historical centers of Korea. And this city represents some traditional Korean culture and also Confucian value. So by inviting the Prime Minister Takaichi to his hometown, the President Lee was sending a message that this relationship between the two countries is becoming more personal based on mutual trust. And at the same time, I think Seoul also wanted to show that the Korea-Japan relationship is no longer limited to formal meeting in capital city. And therefore, the holding the summit in this Andong city created a warmer and more human atmosphere. And there's also an important political message as well. The President Lee has sometimes been seen in Japan as more critical of Japan than previous conservative Korean leaders. However, by hosting the summit in such a symbolic place in Korea and giving what officials called near state guest level treatment to Prime Minister Takaichi, the President Lee was showing that the South Korean government wants pragmatic and also stable relationship with Japan in spite of historical issues. So I think in many ways, the location itself became part of the diplomacy.
Definitely. And also this meeting, it marked the 6th Korea-Japan summit since the launch of the Lee Jae-myung administration, and what we call the so-called shuttle diplomacy, it's appearing much more firmly restored. Professor Che, how significant is that itself for the stability and direction of bilateral ties?
Yes, I think the restoration of so-called shuttle diplomacy between Korea and Japan is very important, because regular communication help prevent tensions from growing into bigger problem. And in the past, Korea and Japan often had some political and diplomatic disputes because of historical issues, and this kind of problem often stopped the high-level talk between the two countries. However, when leaders meet regularly and also maintain this direct communication channel, it becomes much easier to manage disagreements before they become more serious. And what is especially interesting is also the speed and frequency of the summit meeting. And this was already the 6th summit meeting under the Lee Jae-myung administration. And both leaders even visited each other's hometown within just a few months. And this is quite unusual in diplomacy. So how was this possible? So I think the current global situation, which is very unstable, right? And this situation is pushing Seoul and Tokyo closer together. So both Korea and Japan are facing, for example, pressure from the Trump administration, including some demand related to the Hormuz Strait peace operation, and also there are tariff issues, right? So in that kind of uncertain environment, I think both leaders seem to feel a stronger need for close cooperation and communication. So I think this frequent shuttle diplomacy is not just symbolic, it's a very practical tool for maintaining Korea-Japan relationship in this difficult international environment.
So as Professor Che has mentioned, we are living in this era of uncertainty, of course, a lot of uncertainty we're seeing around the world. And despite historical tensions that still remain between the two countries, the latest summit appeared to place much greater emphasis on future-oriented cooperation and practical coordination as well. Professor Jenkins, do you think Seoul and Tokyo are now entering a more stable phase in terms of relationship?
Yeah, so, I want to be cautious because we've seen this happen from time to time, relations becoming a bit warmer. As I mentioned, in the early 90s, a similar thawing in relations happened. And in the later 90s also, again, we had a bit of a thaw. And then in 2011 is kind of when the recent trouble in the relationship began or rose to the surface again. So I think, though, the thing that makes me a little more confident that it's going to keep going is that the strategic situation, like the interests, right? The strategic interests are totally different from 2011. We if you think about everything that happened between 2011 and now, you got the coronavirus, you have the Ukraine-Russia war, you have the rise of China as a legitimate challenger to U.S. hegemonic power. You have the COVID virus, right? This disruption in supply chains. Now, all these things happen. It's just a totally different world we live in, and the strategic interests that Japan and Korea face are just vastly different. And I think this, in terms of if you want to bet on what's going to happen, you look at what the strategic interests are, and there's a massive incentive to cooperate right now, economically, militarily, diplomatically, between South Korea and Japan, and I think those are very strong, and I think it's going to drive cooperation into the near future. You never know, because public opinion can change. The strategic situation can change, but right now, especially given the sort of the vacillation of the United States in terms of its willingness to support its two partners, I think those are some pretty strong incentives to keep cooperating.
Now, if we delve deeper into the concrete agendas during the summit, the two leaders also agreed to strengthen cooperation in LNG and crude oil amid growing instability, of course, in global energy markets due to the Middle East situation. Professor Che, how effective do you think this kind of Korea-Japan coordination could actually be in responding to future supply chain shocks?
Yes, so it's true that both countries are now sharing some concerns about global economic situation. But I think these kind of concerns are now pushing both countries much closer together. So the regional instability in the Middle East after the invasion of Iran by the United States has created growing concern about energy supply, oil price, and global supply chain. And since both countries, Korea and Japan, are highly dependent on external oil and gas, so we are both very sensitive and vulnerable to global energy shock. And that's why the two leaders focus so much on LNG cooperation, oil supply coordination, and supply chain partnership during this summit. So I think this kind of coordination can be quite effective, especially during a sudden crisis. And of course, both Korea and Japan cannot control global energy price, or we cannot control major geopolitical conflict between, for example, China and the United States. However, the close cooperation between the two countries can help reduce risk and improve crisis management. For example, sharing information on the LNG supply and oil reserve and the conditions of a sea lane, and this kind of information can help both countries react more quickly during emergency and also prevent unnecessary panic in the energy market. So in that sense, I think today's summit showed that Korea and Japan increasingly see each other not only as neighbors, but also as a key partner for energy security.
So combined efforts between the two would definitely be helpful moving forward. Now, the two sides have also reaffirmed closer Korea-Japan and Korea-US-Japan security coordination while also discussing peace and stability on the Korean peninsula. Excuse me. Professor Jenkins, in your view, how important is Korea-Japan cooperation becoming in responding to the North Korean issue and the broader security environment?
Yeah, it's central. I mean, it's greatly important, right? The two countries have very complementary capabilities. Korea is in a sort of a forward position with massive intelligence gathering capabilities and forward capabilities, whereas Japan sits more of in a rear support position, has a number of naval bases, naval capacity, and it is in a great position to provide backup support, right, and to support any kind of military operations in Korea. So it's massively important, and it's not just North Korea, right? North Korea is just one issue in a complex of issues like that affect the broader Indo-Pacific. Right, you have the rise of China, you have the rise of the Southeast Asian powers. And so I think that and the expansion of China into the South China Sea, for example. And so these things are not something that they can do alone, right? They're not going to be able to handle it alone. Taiwan, right, is another one. These are things that are going to require a cooperation. And, people have the tendency to sort of approach Korea as if it were still back in the 1990s or something. Korea is a middle power. Like Korea is a strong country, and it's, however, it faces this growing potential security dilemma, right? In terms of these issues I just spoke about. And so it's going to require cooperation. It's going to require an alliance, right, of sorts in order to meet the challenge. And I think that that alliance, that partnership, well, maybe not use the word alliance exactly. If it goes to that degree, awesome. But certainly at least partnership and coordination is going to be essential to combating North Korea, especially in the context of like changing capabilities in terms of AI, North Korea's expanding nuclear capabilities and these sorts of things. And that's just not something you be able to do alone.
Right. And now that you've just pointed out, the two countries also emphasize cooperation in advanced industries like AI and space and biotechnology as well. How far could this industrial and economic impact of this cooperation realistically expand going forward?
Yeah, so I think there's a certain, there's high potential for it to expand. They have military complementarities. They also have economic complementarities. For example, South Korea manufactures semiconductors, right? South Korea is one of the world's largest manufacturers of semiconductors. In order to make the semiconductors, South Korea requires a chemical called photoresists, and those are made by Japan, right? And so there are a number of these complementarities that, in the past, we've just sort of looked at those as, okay, those are just separate parallel industries growing up. One happens to feed into the other. And I think now what they're realizing is that these complementarities need to be strengthened and coordinated, right? And they need to be a little bit better managed, right? And so I think there's enormous potential there. On the AI front, the real leaders in AI are, of course, United States and China. So I think for the Korea-Japan partnership, it would be more about expanding the sort of hardware basis that is able to adapt to AI as it continues to evolve and to handle AI capabilities. I guess the thing that would be most complementary would be AI in the medical field, right? Both countries face an aging population, and both countries are sort of rushing to develop AI technologies in the medical field. And so I think that's probably an area where they could certainly, we would expect to see greater cooperation and information sharing and as we go on to the future.
So it's definitely something to look forward to moving forward. Now, on historical issues, the two governments have also announced the start of DNA identification procedures related to remains recovered from Japan's Chosei coal mine. Professor Che, what significance does this carry in terms of addressing historical issues between the two countries? And do you think it could lead to more meaningful progress?
I think it is a small but meaningful step in dealing with the historical issues between Korea and Japan. The DNA identification process is basically an effort to identify the remains of Korean forced labor victims who died at Japan's Chosei coal mine during the colonial era and return them to their family. And of course, historical issues are very sensitive and difficult to solve completely. But the important point is that the two governments are still trying to cooperate on humanitarian issues. And I think both leaders are trying to handle history in a more calm and future-oriented way. So instead of turning every historical issue into diplomatic trouble, they are starting with the areas where practical cooperation is still possible. So I don't think this alone will solve all historical issues between the two countries. But I think these efforts, the identification of DNA, it can still become a meaningful starting point toward building a more trust and a more stable and durable relationship between the two countries.
Right. So given the background between the two, even limited progress can still carry a lot of meaning moving forward. Now, beyond this formal talks, the two leaders are also expected to continue their exchange through a traditional Andong-style dinner and cultural events, including the Seonyu Julbulnori fireworks performance. Professor Che, how important can these kinds of cultural and emotional gestures be in strengthening bilateral trust?
I think these kind of cultural gestures and cultural ceremonies are actually quite important, especially between Korea and Japan, where history and emotion still matters a lot. So formal meetings and formal agreements are important, of course, but diplomacy is also about building trust and personal relationship between leaders. So sharing food and the local food and culture and the traditional events, and they can help create a warmer and a more relaxed atmosphere. And I also think that this kind of a gesture can send a positive message to people in both countries, because they show that the relationship in the two countries is not only about politics and security, they are also about the mutual respect and human connection. So while this kind of cultural events may look like symbolic, but I think they can still help create a better and a long-term relationship between the two countries.
Let's hope for that to make a lot of more progress moving forward. Now, finally, before just the symbolism and ceremony that we've seen today, Professor Jenkins, what do you think will ultimately determine whether this summit becomes a genuine turning point in Korea-Japan relations?
Right. So I think, turning point is a lot to expect. The main thing is keep it going, right? If they keep it going and they keep these regularized talks up, regularized summits up, that's gonna be very important in making this a real change in South Korea-Japan relations. I think the best thing is to institutionalize them, right? Have annual summits, give it a name, right? Something like this that creates, and it's not just a a one-off, right? It's not just a one-time show. It's a regularized annual or biannual sort of summit, and I think to institutionalize it like that and formalize it would be a great step, and to expand just beyond politics, is, job training exchanges, for example, lower level ministerial meetings, like education exchanges. I think a broader platform of cooperation is going to help make this difficult to just abandon, right? What you want to do from South Korea's perspective and Japan's perspective is to make sure that this is something that it would be politically difficult to just give up, right? You had this great thing going, this great partnership, and then you just walked away because of some political reason, right? Because that's what happens, right? A Japanese politician will go and visit the Asakuni Shrine, and then that will destroy the entire talks, right? Even it has to be something. It has to be made, strengthened so that it won't. The relationship won't just collapse because of some event like that, or because of a protest in Korea, or because of a court ruling in Korea. Right, there has to be some political capital invested in this that makes it something that's genuine and worthy of continuing to pursue.
Right, a very important point, and we'll be looking forward to see whether today's momentum would continue in the coming years to come. But as for now, we'll have to end our discussion right here. Thank you so much for your insights tonight, Professor Jenkins.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And Professor Che, we really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Till then, stay informed and engaged.
Time to set the facts straight. Get Korea right. K-culture is sweeping the globe. K-pop, K-drama, K-movie, K-food, and even K-beauty.